The Great Hall of the Galactic Trade Council buzzed with excited chatter. Hundreds of alien representatives filled the massive chamber, their scales, feathers, and strange skin colors creating a rainbow of species from across the galaxy. At the front of the room, High Arbiter Velkan stood tall on his 6 legs, his purple skin gleaming under the bright lights. His 4 eyes swept across the crowd as he prepared to announce the vote results. In the back corner of the hall, 3 humans sat quietly at their small table. Ambassador Daeho Kim wore his best diplomatic uniform, but it looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor of the other species. His weathered face showed no emotion as he watched the proceedings. Next to him, Sora Park tapped quietly on, her data pad, recording everything that happened. Her dark eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the room. Military attaché Wu Jin Lee sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the table, but his jaw was tight with controlled anger. The humans had been part of the Galactic Trade Council for 30 years now. In that time, Earth had become the backbone of galactic commerce. Human farmers grew food that fed billions across hundreds of worlds. Human miners dug precious metals from dangerous asteroids that other species were too afraid to approach. Human engineers built the machines and ships that kept civilization running. Human traders designed the complex shipping routes that connected distant star systems. But despite providing 60% of everything the galaxy needed, humans only got 3% of the votes in the council. The alien species had made it clear from the beginning that humans were useful but not equal. They were workers, not partners. They were tools, not citizens. Daeho had spent 3 decades fighting for human rights in this chamber. He had given thousands of speeches, written countless reports, and negotiated with species that saw his people as little more than clever animals. Every small victory had cost years of effort. Every defeat had been accepted with diplomatic grace, even when it hurt millions of human lives. High Arbiter. Velkan's voice boomed across the hall. The vote on motion 4471B has concluded. The results are 537 votes in favor, 12 votes against, and 3 abstentions. A cheer rose from the alien delegates. They clapped their hands, tentacles, and claws together in celebration. Some species made strange whistling or clicking sounds of joy. The motion had passed by an overwhelming majority. Sora stopped typing and looked up at Daeho. Her face had gone pale. Motion 4471B was the relocation order. The Council had just voted to force 50 million humans to leave their homes on 12 different colony worlds. These weren't empty planets or small settlements. These were worlds where humans had lived for generations, where they had built cities and farms and schools for their children. The reason for the relocation was simple. The Veltari species wanted to build luxury vacation planets in those systems. They had decided that the views were too beautiful to waste on human colonies. The displaced humans would be moved to less desirable worlds with harsh climates and poor soil. The Council had voted to destroy 50 million human lives for the convenience of wealthy Veltari tourists. Prime Minister Korth of the Zenthaki species stood up from his golden chair. His snake-like body swayed as he spoke in his hissing voice. This is a great day for galactic prosperity. The natural order has been maintained. The more advanced species guide the development of space, while the worker species serve where they are most useful. More cheers filled the hall. Several alien delegates nodded their heads in agreement. This was how things worked in the galaxy. The strong decided, and the weak obeyed. Humans were strong workers, but they were not strong enough to make their own choices. Daeho felt something break inside his chest. It wasn't anger, though anger was there. It wasn't sadness, though sadness was there too. It was something deeper and colder. It was the final death of hope that had been slowly dying for 30 years. He looked at the faces around the room. Some aliens showed genuine joy at the decision. Others looked bored, as if moving 50 million humans was no more important than rearranging furniture. A few looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to have voted differently. These beings saw his species as useful pets. They appreciated human work ethic and intelligence the same way they might appreciate a well-trained animal. Humans could be moved around, used up and discarded whenever it was convenient. The aliens had never seen them as people with rights and dreams and families. Deho stood up slowly. The movement was quiet, but somehow it caught the attention of nearby delegates. Conversations began to fade as more and more aliens noticed the human ambassador rising from his seat. Within moments, the entire hall had fallen silent. Sora and Wu Jin looked up at him with surprise. Deho had never interrupted council proceedings before. He was always careful to follow proper diplomatic protocol, even when discussing matters that hurt his people. High Arbiter Velkan turned his 4 eyes toward the human delegation. Ambassador Kim, the floor is not currently open for discussion. If you wish to speak, you must submit a formal request through proper channels. Deho's voice was calm and steady. That will not be necessary, High Arbiter. I have only one brief statement to make. He looked around the room, meeting as many alien eyes as possible. Some delegates leaned forward with curiosity. Others looked annoyed at the interruption. Most seemed amused that the human was finally showing some emotion. The Terran Federation formally withdraws from all galactic treaties, effective immediately, Deho said. His words carried clearly through the silent hall. We resign our membership in the Galactic Trade Council. We cancel all trade agreements, shipping contracts, and diplomatic arrangements with every species represented here. For a moment, nobody moved. The statement was so unexpected that many delegates weren't sure they had heard correctly. Then the laughter began. It started with a few chuckles from the Zenthaki delegation, then spread across the room like a wave. Soon hundreds of aliens were laughing, whistling, and making whatever sounds their species used to show amusement. The idea that humans could survive without galactic support was hilarious to them. High Arbiter Velkan's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. Ambassador Kim, please do not make threats you cannot fulfill. Humans are valuable workers, but you are completely dependent on galactic infrastructure for survival. Your colonies would starve without our trade networks. Your ships cannot navigate interstellar space without our guidance systems. You have no choice but to accept our decisions. Deho reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked like an ordinary communication unit, but Sora recognized it immediately. It was a priority alert beacon, used only in the most extreme emergencies. Deho had never activated it before. He pressed the single red button on the device. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of human ships and stations and colonies, identical devices began to beep with an urgent tone. The message was simple and had been prepared years ago, hoping it would never be needed. Exodus Protocol is now active. All personnel return home immediately. Take nothing that belongs to others. Harm no one. Just come home. Deho placed the device back in his pocket and looked once more around the laughing crowd of aliens. You will find that we are more capable than you believed, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. Sora quickly gathered her datapad and files, her fingers shaking slightly as she realized what was happening. Wu Jin stood and followed his colleagues, his military training keeping his movements calm and controlled despite the chaos beginning in his mind. Behind them, the laughter continued. The aliens were too busy celebrating their victory to understand that everything was about to change. Within 72 hours, they would no longer be laughing. Captain Jinwoo Choi was hauling a cargo of luxury goods through the Zenthari system when his priority beacon started beeping. He looked at the small red light flashing on his control panel and felt his stomach drop. Every human in space knew what that sound meant, but nobody thought they would ever hear it. Jinwoo had been a freighter captain for 15 years. His ship carried expensive items between alien worlds, fancy foods, rare metals, beautiful artwork, and technological devices that only the wealthy could afford. The aliens paid well for his shipping services, and Jinwoo took pride in his work. He had never lost a cargo or missed a delivery deadline, but now the beacon was telling him to come home immediately. The message was clear. Take nothing that belongs to others. Harm no one. Just come home. Jinwoo looked at his cargo hold readings. 50,000 tons of Zenthari luxury goods filled his ship. Silk fabrics, precious gems, rare spices, and electronic devices worth millions of credits. The cargo belonged to wealthy Zenthari merchants who were expecting delivery next week. He thought about his contract. He thought about his reputation. He thought about the legal trouble he might face for abandoning valuable cargo in deep space. Then he thought about the 30 years his people had been treated like servants by the galactic community. Jin Woo activated his ship's cargo bay doors and watched 50,000 tons of expensive goods float away into the darkness of space. Then he turned his ship toward Earth. On the agricultural station orbiting Kepler 442b, Mi Young-han heard the same beeping sound while she was working in the genetics lab. She had spent 8 years developing new crop varieties that could grow in alien soil. Her modified wheat could survive in the harsh environment of desert worlds. Her enhanced rice could grow in the toxic atmosphere of mining planets. Her work fed billions of aliens across the galaxy. Mi Young looked at the computers storing all her research data. 20 years of human agricultural knowledge was saved in these machines. Genetic codes, soil formulas, growing techniques, and farming methods that the aliens could never figure out on their own. They had always assumed this information belonged to the galactic community. She began typing commands into her computer. One by one, she deleted every file containing human agricultural research. She destroyed the genetic codes for modified crops. She erased the soil treatment formulas. She wiped out the environmental adaptation data. Within an hour, 20 years of agricultural science vanished from the galactic database. The alien supervisors on the station didn't understand what was happening until it was too late. They watched Mi Young pack her personal belongings and walk to the shuttle bay. They asked her where she was going, but she just smiled and said she was going home. Deep in the asteroid mines of the Vega system, Sung-Ho Yoon was directing the extraction of rare metals when his beacon activated. He supervised 300 human miners who worked in conditions too dangerous for most alien species. The Vega asteroids contained valuable elements needed for spaceship engines and computer systems, but the mining process required courage and skill that only humans seemed to possess. Sung-Ho looked around at the massive mining operation. Dozens of human-operated machines were cutting through solid rock. Human engineers monitored the complex systems that kept everyone alive in the vacuum of space. Human technicians maintained the orbital refineries that turned raw ore into pure metals. The mining operation was completely dependent on human workers and human knowledge. The aliens who owned the mining rights lived safely on distant worlds and collected the profits, but they had no idea how to actually run the mines. Sung-Ho activated the mine's communication system and spoke to all the human workers. Everyone, stop what you're doing and report to the transport ships immediately. We're going home. Within 6 hours, every human worker had left the asteroid mines. They took their tools and equipment, but they also took something more valuable, the access codes for the orbital refineries. Without those codes, the automated systems would shut down in 72 hours. Tons of processed metals would be trapped in the refineries with no way to retrieve them. The same scene played out across 847 star systems. Human freighter captains abandoned their cargo and turned their ships toward Earth. Human farmers shut down agricultural stations and erased their research data. Human miners left their dangerous jobs and took their technical knowledge with them. Human engineers, doctors, teachers, and technicians all heard the same message and made the same choice. They were going home. At first, the aliens didn't understand what was happening. They had grown so used to human workers that they barely noticed them anymore. Humans were just part of the background of galactic civilization, like the air recycling systems or the artificial gravity generators. Commander Thex of the Zenthaki military was the first to realize something was wrong. His fleet of 12 battleships was patrolling the outer rim when the human maintenance crews simply didn't show up for their shifts. The ship's engines were making strange noises, and several critical systems were showing warning lights. Thex called the human chief engineer, but got no answer. He sent security teams to the human quarters but found them empty. Every human on his ships had quietly left during the night shift, taking the next transport back to human space. How hard can it be to fix a few machines? Thex asked his Zenthaki officers. But when they opened the maintenance panels, they found systems so complex that none of them could understand the controls. The humans had maintained these ships for so many years that no alien crew member had bothered to learn how the engines actually worked. Dr. Yilseth, the chief scientist on the Veltari research station, faced a similar problem. Her team was trying to reverse engineer human agricultural techniques, but all the data files were corrupted or missing. The human researchers had been working on the station for 12 years, and now they were gone along with all their knowledge. Surely we can figure out how they grew those crops, Dr. Yilseth told her staff. But when they tried to recreate the human farming methods, everything went wrong. Plants died, soil turned toxic, and entire greenhouse sections failed. The humans had made agriculture look easy, but it required knowledge and skills that the aliens had never bothered to learn. Merchant Lord Kov watched his trading empire collapse in real time. His business depended on the shipping routes that human captains had designed over 3 decades. These routes connected distant star systems in the most efficient way possible, saving time and fuel for interstellar commerce. But the routes only existed in the minds and computers of human navigators. When the humans left, they took their navigation data with them. Alien pilots tried to fly the same paths, but they got lost in hyperspace, ran out of fuel, or took twice as long to reach their destinations. Within 72 hours, reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Food shipments weren't arriving on schedule. Mining operations had shut down completely. Critical systems were failing without human maintenance. Trade routes were collapsing as alien pilots couldn't navigate efficiently. The Galactic Trade Council called an emergency meeting. High Arbiter Velkan stood before the assembly, but he no longer looked confident. His purple skin had faded to a worried gray color, and his 4 eyes darted nervously around the room. "This is clearly a temporary situation," he announced to the anxious delegates. "The humans are making an emotional gesture, but they will return when they realize they need our support to survive. We just need to wait for them to come to their senses." But as days turned into weeks, the humans didn't come back. Ships carrying emergency supplies tried to reach human colonies, but found the borders completely closed. Communication attempts were ignored. Trade offers were rejected without explanation. The humans had simply vanished from galactic civilization, taking their knowledge, skills, and labor with them. For the first time in 30 years, the galaxy would have to survive without them. The aliens were about to learn just how much they had depended on the species they had treated as servants. 3 months after the humans left, Dr. Yilseth stood in the ruins of what used to be the most productive agricultural station in the galaxy. Dead plants covered the floors of the massive greenhouse domes. The air smelled of rotting vegetables and failed experiments. Her team of Veltari scientists had tried everything they could think of, but nothing worked. "Try increasing the mineral content in the water again," she told her assistant, Dr. Colvin. They had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to save at least 1 crop of modified wheat. The seeds looked exactly like the ones humans had grown successfully for years, but somehow they kept dying. Dr. Colvin shook his head tiredly. "We've tried every combination we can think of. Higher minerals, lower minerals, different temperatures, different light patterns. Nothing grows the way it did when the humans were here." Dr. Yilseth picked up a handful of dark soil and let it run through her fingers. The humans had used this same soil to grow enough food to feed 3 billion aliens across 12 star systems. Now it was just dirt that killed everything planted in it. "How did they make it look so easy?" she whispered to herself. The same question was being asked across the galaxy. On the mining station in the Vega system, alien workers had managed to restart some of the extraction machines, but the ore they produced was full of impurities. The refined metals were weak and brittle, nothing like the high-quality materials humans had extracted from the same asteroids. Station Commander Veltok stared at a piece of twisted metal that had broken during testing. "The humans were using the exact same equipment," he told his engineering team. "They were mining the same rocks. Why can't we get the same results?" Chief Engineer Kilmar ran another test on the metal sample. "The atomic structure is completely wrong. It's like we're missing some crucial step in the refining process, but we've followed all the procedures in the database." "What procedures?" Veltok asked. "Half the files were corrupted when the humans left, and the other half don't make sense. They reference techniques and equipment settings that aren't in any of our manuals." The truth was slowly becoming clear to aliens across the galaxy. The humans hadn't just been following instructions or using alien technology. They had been improving everything they touched, adding their own knowledge and skills to make systems work better than they were designed to work. Commander Thex of the Zenthaki military was learning the same lesson the hard way. His fleet of 12 battleships was now down to 4 working vessels. The other 8 were drifting in space with engine failures, life support problems, or navigation system crashes. "How long until the repair crews arrive?" he asked his communications officer. "Sir, the nearest repair facility says they can't help us. Their human technicians left 3 months ago, and they don't have anyone qualified to work on our engine type." Thex felt a cold fear growing in his chest. "What about the shipyard at Kepler Station, or the maintenance depot on Proxima 7? "Same problem everywhere, sir. All the qualified technicians were human." Thex looked out at his damaged fleet and realized the horrible truth. The mighty Zenthaki military, with their advanced technology and superior breeding, couldn't fix their own spaceships without human help. They had become completely dependent on the species they considered inferior. On the trading world of New Geneva, Merchant Lord Kov was watching his fortune disappear. His shipping network had carried goods between 200 star systems, generating billions of credits in profit every year. Now his warehouses were full of products that couldn't be delivered, and his transport ships sat empty in their docks. "Surely we can hire pilots from other species," he told his business manager, a nervous Altarian named Zekmol. "We've tried, sir. The Rigelian Pilots Guild says our shipping routes are too complex for their navigators. The Centaurian Transport Union won't fly routes longer than 50 light-years. The human routes averaged 300 light-years and passed through 17 different types of space hazards." Kov pulled up a holographic map of the galaxy, showing the trade routes his company had used for 20 years. The lines connecting different star systems looked like a spider web, with hundreds of interconnected paths forming an impossibly complex network. "How did human pilots memorize all of this?" he asked. "They didn't just memorize it, sir. According to the records, they designed most of it. Our shipping routes were created by human navigators over 30 years. They understood space currents, gravitational fields, and hyperspace mechanics better than any other species. The food crisis was getting worse every day. Without human agricultural techniques, crop yields had dropped by 70% across the galaxy. Worlds that had never worried about food security were now facing starvation." On the water world of Aquaria Prime, Governor Siltha watched emergency food supplies being distributed to hungry citizens. The planet's population of 8 billion had always depended on imported grain from human-operated farms. "How long will our emergency reserves last?" she asked her aide. "At current consumption rates, maybe 6 more weeks. After that..." The aide's voice trailed off. Both of them knew what happened to civilizations that ran out of food. "What about local production? Can't we grow our own crops?" "We're trying, Governor, but our agricultural specialists don't understand human farming methods. The seeds we have require specific soil conditions, nutrient mixtures, and growing techniques that only humans knew how to provide." Governor Siltha felt panic rising in her throat. Aquaria Prime was one of the most advanced worlds in the galaxy, with technology that could terraform planets and build cities in the depths of space. But they couldn't figure out how to grow simple wheat and rice. The emergency council meetings were happening every day now. Hundreds of alien representatives gathered in the Great Hall, but instead of the confident discussions of the past, there was only fear and confusion. High Arbiter Velkon's purple skin had turned almost gray with stress. His 4 eyes looked tired and worried as he addressed the assembly. "The situation is more serious than we initially calculated. Our economic analysts report that interstellar trade has dropped by 80%. Food production is down 70%. Industrial output has fallen by 60%. Prime Minister Korth of the Zenthaki coiled his snake-like body nervously. "This is clearly a temporary setback. We just need time to adjust our systems and train new workers. Any species can learn to do what humans were doing." But even as he spoke, Korth knew his words weren't true. His own military commanders had reported that they couldn't maintain their spaceships without human technicians. His economic advisors had told him that Zenthaki workers couldn't match human productivity in any industry. Delegate Morketh of the Rigelian Republic stood up slowly. "Perhaps we should consider apologizing to the humans. Maybe if we offered them better representation in the council, they would agree to return." The hall erupted in angry voices. Many delegates shouted that they would never apologize to an inferior species. Others argued that humans were bluffing and would eventually come back on their own. A few suggested using military force to bring the humans back to work. But High Arbiter Velcon knew that military action was impossible. Half the galaxy's warships were broken down without human maintenance crews. The other half couldn't navigate, effectively without human pilots. Dr. Etherol, the Council's chief economist, presented the most frightening report of all. Based on current trends, we estimate that galactic civilization has approximately 18 months before complete economic collapse. Food shortages will cause mass starvation within 6 months. Critical infrastructure will fail within 12 months. Without human workers and expertise, our civilization cannot survive. The hall fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. For 30 years, they had seen humans as useful servants who should be grateful for the opportunity to work for superior species. Now they were learning that humans hadn't been the servants at all. They had been the foundation that held everything together. Outside the council chambers, emergency broadcasts were playing on every communication channel. Food riots had started on 12 different worlds. 3 star systems had declared martial law to maintain order. The Galactic Stock Exchange had crashed completely, wiping out trillions of credits in investments. But the most frightening reports came from the scouts and traders who had tried to contact human space. They all reported the same thing. The borders were completely sealed. No ships were allowed in or out of human territory. All communication attempts were ignored. The humans had vanished completely from galactic affairs, leaving behind a civilization that was slowly falling apart without them. 6 months after the humans disappeared, Scout Captain Zilmar received the most dangerous assignment of his career. The Galactic Council wanted someone to fly into human space and find out what was happening. Every attempt to contact Earth had been ignored. Emergency food shipments had been turned away at the border. Even diplomatic vessels carrying peace offers had been sent back without explanation. Zilmar piloted his small scout ship toward the edge of human territory, his forearms trembling slightly on the controls. He had been exploring dangerous regions of space for 20 years, but he had never been more frightened than he was right now. The humans had been quiet neighbors for 3 decades. Now they were complete strangers. As his ship crossed into the Sol system, Zilmar expected to see the same planets he remembered from his last visit 5 years ago. Earth had been a busy world back then, with thousands of ships coming and going every day. The asteroid belt had been filled with mining stations. Mars had hosted a small but growing colony. What he saw instead made him freeze in terror. Massive structures surrounded Earth, each one the size of a small moon. They weren't space stations or shipyards. They were something completely new. The metal constructions pulsed with energy readings that his instruments couldn't fully measure. Strange geometric shapes rotated slowly in orbital patterns that followed. No design he recognized. "This is Scout Captain Zilmar reporting to Council Command," he whispered into his communication system. "I have reached human space, but this isn't what we expected to find." The response came immediately. "Report your observations, Captain." Zilmar looked at his sensor readings and felt his blood turn cold. "The humans have constructed orbital platforms around Earth. The energy signatures are impossible. My instruments are reading power outputs that exceed anything in our databases." He flew closer to get better sensor readings, and what he discovered was even more frightening. The massive orbital structures weren't just producing energy, they were manufacturing something. His scanners detected industrial activity on a scale that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. "Council Command, the construction activity here is beyond our understanding. They're building something massive, and they're doing it faster than should be physically possible." As Zilmar's ship moved deeper into the system, automated defense systems activated around him. But instead of weapons, he found himself surrounded by escort vessels that appeared out of nowhere. The ships were sleek and beautiful, with hull designs that seemed to flow like liquid metal. They moved with a grace and speed that made his military scout ship look clumsy and primitive. A human voice spoke over his communication system. It was calm and polite, but somehow more terrifying than any threat would have been. "Scout vessel, you are entering restricted space. Please state your business." Zilmar's voice cracked as he replied. "I am Scout Captain Zilmar of the Galactic Council. We have been trying to establish communication with human leadership for 6 months. Our messages have not been answered. Your messages have been received and reviewed. No response was deemed necessary. You have 60 seconds to turn around and leave human space, or you will be escorted out. Please, Captain, our civilization is collapsing without human workers. Billions of people are starving. We need to negotiate some kind of agreement." There was a long pause before the human voice replied. "That is not our problem to solve. 50 seconds. Zilmar looked at his instruments one more time, trying to gather as much information as possible. What he saw in those final moments would haunt him for the rest of his life. The energy readings from the orbital platforms had increased dramatically. Whatever the humans were building, it was almost ready. He turned his ship around and fled toward the border as fast as his engines could carry him. Deep in Veltari space, spy network asset Kektal was having his own terrifying encounter with human capabilities. He had managed to infiltrate a human convoy that was carrying supplies to a remote research station. His mission was simple: find out what the humans were working on and report back to his handlers. But what he discovered at the research station defied everything he thought he knew about human technology. The facility was carved into an asteroid, but the interior was larger than seemed physically possible. Corridors stretched for miles underground, filled with machinery that hummed with incredible energy. Kektal hid in a maintenance shaft and watched human workers moving through the facility. They moved with a confidence and purpose that was completely different from the way they had behaved as galactic workers. These weren't the same humans who had quietly accepted alien orders for 30 years. Dr. Yoon-Soo Jung walked past his hiding place, carrying data tablets that showed equations and diagrams he couldn't understand. She was talking to another scientist about something called dimensional folding and quantum cascade reactions. The terms meant nothing to Kektal, but the excitement in their voices was unmistakable. "The test results exceed all our projections," Dr. Jung was saying. "We should be ready for full implementation within 3 months." "Full implementation of what?" her colleague asked. "The new drive system. We'll be able to cross the galaxy in days instead of months. No more depending on hyperspace lanes or gravitational shortcuts." Kektal felt his heart stop beating. Faster than light, travel was the foundation of galactic civilization. Every species used the same basic hyperspace technology that had been discovered thousands of years ago. If humans had developed something better, something faster, he tried to move closer, to hear more of their conversation, but his foot slipped on the metal shaft. The small sound echoed through the corridor, and both humans immediately looked in his direction. "Security breach in Section 7, Dr. Jung said calmly into her communication device. "We have a visitor." Within seconds, human security personnel surrounded Kektal's hiding place. They pulled him out of the maintenance shaft with firm but gentle hands. Nobody seemed angry or surprised to find a spy in their facility. "Let me guess," said the security chief, a woman named Captain Hyo-jin. "Nam, you're here to find out what we're building, so your people can figure out how to copy it or steal it." Kektal tried to think of a cover story, but the human woman interrupted him. "Save your breath. We know exactly who you are and who sent you. We've been monitoring galactic intelligence operations for years. You're not the first spy we've caught, and you won't be the last." She gestured for him to follow her down the corridor. "Since you're here, let me show you something that will help you write a better report for your handlers." They walked through several levels of the facility until they reached a massive chamber filled with what looked like starship engines. But these weren't like any engines Kektal had ever seen. They were smooth and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. "Impressive, isn't it?" Captain Nam said. "We call it the Infinity Drive. It doesn't use hyperspace at all. Instead, it folds space-time around the ship, allowing us to step from one location to another instantly." Kektal stared at the engines in horror. That's impossible. Space-time folding requires energy levels that would destroy any known material." Captain Nam smiled. "Any known alien material, yes. But we've developed new substances that can handle the stress. We've also learned to generate power levels that your scientists think are theoretically impossible." She led him to another section of the facility, where massive generators hummed with contained energy. "We've been working on this technology for decades, even while we were serving your people. Every human scientist, engineer, and researcher has been contributing to our advancement. We never stopped learning and growing." "But why?" Kektal asked. "Why develop all of this in secret? Why not share it with the galactic community?" Captain Nam's expression turned cold. "Because we learned long ago that the galactic community isn't interested in partnership. They want servants, not equals. So we decided to become something else entirely. She escorted him back to his ship, which had been refueled and supplied for his journey home. As he prepared to leave, she gave him a final message. Tell your leaders that humanity is no longer the species they remember. We are becoming something new, something they have never encountered before. The next time we meet, it will be on our terms, not theirs. Back on his home world, Deep Space Monitor Velkoth was tracking energy signatures from across the galaxy. His job was to watch for unusual activity that might indicate military buildups or technological breakthroughs. What he had been detecting from human space for the past 6 months was beyond anything in his experience. The power readings were increasing every day. Whatever humans were building, it was consuming energy at levels that should have been impossible to generate safely. But somehow, human space wasn't showing any signs of instability or dangerous radiation. Velkoth printed out his latest sensor reports and studied them carefully. The numbers didn't make sense. According to his calculations, humans were generating more power than some entire star systems. They were doing it cleanly, efficiently, and safely. More frightening than the power levels were the construction readings. Humans were building things in space at a rate that defied physical laws. Materials were being assembled. 1 year after Ambassador Dae-Ho Kim had walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, the aliens were learning what true desperation felt like. Half the galaxy's population was surviving on emergency food rations. 3 major star systems had completely collapsed, their governments unable to maintain basic services without human expertise. The mighty Zenthaki military was down to less than 20% operational capacity. High Arbiter Velkon stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his once purple skin now a sickly gray color. His 4 eyes were sunken with exhaustion and stress. Around him, the great hall that had once buzzed with confident alien voices was now filled with desperate whispers and fearful glances. The situation has become critical, Velkon announced to the assembled delegates. Our latest reports indicate that without immediate intervention, galactic civilization will cease to exist within 6 months. The delegates shifted nervously in their seats. Many of them represented worlds that were already experiencing food riots and infrastructure failures. The proud species that had once considered themselves superior to humans were now barely surviving. Prime Minister Korth coiled, his snake-like body tighter around his chair. Surely the humans will respond to reason. They must understand that we are all part of the same galactic community. They cannot simply allow billions of innocent people to starve. Dr. Ethrol, the council's chief economist, stood up slowly. His report tablets shook in his hands as he spoke. Prime Minister, our intelligence reports suggest that human civilization is not only surviving, it is thriving. Energy readings from human space indicate industrial and technological advancement beyond anything we have ever recorded. An uncomfortable silence filled the hall. The aliens had spent the past year telling themselves that humans would eventually come crawling back, begging to resume their old positions as workers and servants. The idea that humans might be better off without the galactic community was too frightening to consider. That's when the alarms started ringing. Emergency lights flashed throughout the council chambers as the building's defense systems detected massive energy signatures approaching the planet. Traffic control reported that unknown vessels had appeared at the edge of the system, hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation toward the council world. High Arbiter Velkon activated the main viewing screen, and every alien in the chamber gasped in terror at what they saw. The approaching fleet was unlike anything in galactic military databases. The ships were enormous, their hulls gleaming with a metallic finish that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Energy readings from the vessels were off the charts, indicating power systems that dwarfed the most advanced alien technology. "This is impossible," whispered Commander Thex, who was attending the session as a military observer. "Those ships are larger than our biggest dreadnoughts, and there are hundreds of them." The lead ship in the formation was particularly massive, a kilometer-long vessel that radiated authority and power. As the aliens watched in stunned silence, it took position directly above the council chambers, casting a shadow over the entire government complex. A communication signal came through on all frequencies simultaneously. The voice that spoke was calm, professional, and terrifyingly familiar. "This is Ambassador Dae-Ho Kim of the Terran Sovereignty, requesting permission to address the Galactic Council. High Arbiter Velkan stared at the viewing screen in shock. The same human who had quietly walked out of these chambers 1 year ago was now commanding a fleet that could destroy their entire world without effort. Permission. Permission granted, Velkan managed to stammer. The main doors of the council chamber opened, and Dae-ho Kim walked in. But he was no longer the humble diplomat who had accepted alien disrespect for 30 years. He wore a uniform that seemed to be made from materials that didn't exist in galactic databases. His bearing was confident and commanding, like a leader who knew he held all the advantages. Behind him walked 2 other humans. Fleet Admiral Yejin Shin wore a military uniform decorated with symbols that no alien recognized. Her eyes swept the chamber with the calculating gaze of someone assessing potential threats. High Counselor Jae-hyun An carried data tablets and communication devices that hummed with advanced technology. Dae-ho took his position at the center of the chamber, where he could address all the alien delegates directly. The humans no longer sat at a small table in the back corner. They commanded the attention of every being in the room. "Honorable delegates," Dae-ho began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "We have observed the difficulties your civilizations have experienced over the past year. We are here to offer humanitarian assistance and to discuss the establishment of new relationships between our species." The word humanitarian hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. For 30 years, they had provided humanitarian aid to human colonies when it was convenient for them. Now the roles were completely reversed. High Arbiter Velkan found his voice. "Ambassador Kim, we are grateful for your generous offer. Perhaps we can return to the previous arrangements that served us all so well." Dae-ho's expression didn't change. "The previous arrangements are no longer acceptable to the Terran sovereignty. We are here to propose new terms for limited cooperation." High Counselor Jae-hyun An activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Red markers indicated worlds experiencing food shortages, system failures, and economic collapse. The display painted a picture of a galaxy on the verge of total breakdown. "Our humanitarian aid package includes emergency food supplies sufficient to prevent mass starvation for the next 6 months, Jae-hyun announced. "We are also prepared to provide limited technical assistance to repair critical infrastructure on worlds with populations exceeding 1 billion beings." The alien delegates leaned forward eagerly. This was exactly what they had been hoping for. Human expertise returning to save their failing civilizations. "However," Dae-ho continued, "this assistance comes with specific conditions that are not negotiable." Fleet Admiral Yejin Shin stepped forward and began listing the terms. Her voice was crisp and professional, like a military commander dictating surrender conditions to a defeated enemy. First, all interstellar shipping routes developed by human navigators remain under exclusive human control. Any species wishing to use these routes must pay standard commercial fees and follow Terran sovereignty safety regulations. Several delegates started to protest, but Dae-ho silenced them with a raised hand. Second, no non-human settlements will be established in Terran space without express written permission from the Sovereignty Council. Any existing installations in human territory have 30 days to relocate or face removal. Third, the Galactic Trade Council will be restructured to provide proportional representation based on economic contribution. Since human space now accounts for 85% of galactic production capacity, human representatives will hold 85% of council votes. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as they absorbed these terms. The humans weren't asking to return to their old position as servants. They were demanding to become the dominant power in galactic civilization. Prime Minister Korth finally found his voice. "This is outrageous. You cannot simply declare yourselves the rulers of the galaxy." Fleet Admiral Yejin Shin smiled coldly. "We're not declaring ourselves rulers of anything. We're offering trade partnerships and humanitarian aid. You are free to decline our assistance and continue managing your civilizations independently." The threat was clear. Without human help, alien civilizations would collapse completely within months. With human help, they could survive. But only as junior partners in a relationship where humans held all the power. High Arbiter Velkan looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates. He could see the same terrible understanding in all their eyes. They had pushed humanity too far, and now they were facing the consequences. "What guarantee do we have that you will honor these agreements?" he asked weakly. Deho gestured toward the viewing screen, which still showed the massive human fleet positioned above their world. "The same guarantee you gave us for 30 years. You will have to trust that we are more honorable than you were." The voting took less than an hour. Every species in the galaxy accepted the human terms, because the alternative was the complete destruction of their civilizations. The motion passed by a unanimous vote, the same type of overwhelming majority that had once been used to humiliate and exploit human colonies. As the council session ended, Deho prepared to leave the chamber. But before he reached the door, High Arbiter Velkan called out to him. "Ambassador Kim, may I ask you one question?" Deho turned back to face the Veltari leader. "Of course. How long have your people been capable of this?" Velkan gestured toward the ceiling, indicating the powerful fleet above their heads. Deho considered the question for a moment. "We could have built ships like these 20 years ago. We could have developed our advanced technology 30 years ago. We could have conquered the entire galaxy at any point in the past century." The alien delegates stared at him in absolute horror as the full implications of his words sank in.